Welcome to the very best part of my broadcast week. Welcome to Fish Taco, a restaurant we've never been to before out in Tysons Corner, Virginia, because that's very near our guest, Arthur C. Brooks, the prodigious author, massively successful New York Times bestseller, and student of happiness. And because this is our New Year's show, welcome to 2025, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about happiness, how to achieve it, what is it, how do you define it, what are patterns you can develop in pursuit of it. Arthur, it's great to see you.
You too, Major. How are you?
I am well.
You look well.
Thank you.
Look at that. I mean, if I had your hair, I could be president of the United States. So I like to think.
No one's ever said that to me before.
Oh,
so
yeah, it's beautiful.
Well done. Well done.
You know.
Arthur C. Brooks' most recent book is Build the Life You Want, co-authored with someone you've probably heard of, Oprah Winfrey. But he also has a book before that, New York Times bestseller, From Strength to Strength. And I haven't had a chance to read either of those books, so I'm going to say that up front. Usually I do, but I've been a little busy lately.
A little busy, I get it.
But I saw in your note on Amazon that this has been a 25-year pursuit of yours, and you called it something that caught my eye. Not research, me search.
Yeah.
Because as you said in that note, people assume you're a naturally happy person.
Right.
And you said you're not. Not only that, your baseline level of happiness is below average.
It is, according to the best data available. I have a lot of surveys that I administer to my students at the Harvard Business School in this big happiness elective called Leadership and Happiness. And they take 15 surveys to kind of map the lay of the land of their well-being. And I take those pretty seriously because they're good surveys, and I take them myself. I take them every 6 months, you know, when I'm getting ready for the class. And I've seen a lot of improvement, but from a very low baseline. The reason I've seen improvement is because I'm teaching the class. I teach the class and do the research because it's something I want more of. Now, here's a little secret about behavioral science. All behavioral scientists are looking for what they lack.
For what they lack.
Yeah, for what they need in their lives. I mean, the reason the behavioral scientists are so interested in it is because they want to understand their own lives, typically. Now, that's not always the case, I suppose. I mean, if you're studying these dreadful pathologies or something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're on the brink of becoming an axe murderer or something. But most of us that do work in well-being and happiness, we want, well, look, everybody wants more of it, but a lot of us in this business, we actually see something in our lives that could get better and dedicate ourselves to the study of that.
When this survey, when you encountered that survey for the first time, were you surprised by the results?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I've been married for a long time, 33 years, and my wife has reminded me that I could be a lot happier. As a matter of fact, it was her idea. I've been, I studied as a social scientist a long, long time ago, and after a while, over the course of my career doing different things, she said, why don't you use your PhD for something really constructive and do a little bit of work on yourself?
Okay.
You can be a lot happier than you are. You've got a good life.
Right.
I come from gloomy stock. And
gloomy, anxious people.
Indeed. And 50% of your happiness is actually genetic. We know this from identical twins that were separated at birth, and adopted into separate families. So this is a natural experiment that separates nature from nurture because identical twins are DNA carbon copies. And so when they're reunited as adults and given personality tests, you find that a lot of their personalities are genetic, between 40 and 80% of most characteristics, including happiness. Happiness is about 50% genetic. That's the baseline affect level, mood level that you wake up with in the morning. So some people get up, and some people listening to us, watching us right now, they're ebullient and joyful when they wake up. I want you to know that you're annoying. Anyway.
Yes, you ebullient, joyful people.
The rest of us.
So tiresome, so extra.
The rest of us got to do some work.
Right.
But if you know that genetic component, then you can actually tailor your habits. Same thing, if you know that your mom and dad and all four grandparents drank too much alcohol, you should tailor your habits and probably not drink. And it's the same thing. You got to pay more attention to it. So that's why this science is really important and really good. And that's how baselining with the data can help you.
Let me walk through some terminology. Is happiness related to being an extrovert or an introvert?
So not necessarily. What you find is that extroverts have a lot of advantages, particularly at work and in the dating market and in life, but introverts, they tend to have much closer relationships than extroverts do. Extroverts are kind of on the lookout for fresh meat, And so they tend to not go too
Metaphorically
deep.
and practically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose. I mean, it's but introverts, on the other hand, they tend to have a few really close friends, and that's a real source of joy for them. So if they're in circumstances like business school that's rewarding extroversion, it can be really hard on introverts, and they can have a period where they're not as happy. But generally speaking, they have a lot of deep love in their lives.
How about, well, that person, she's a positive person.
Right.
And that guy I work with, he's a negative person. Is that a characterization or a brand or an identifier that we should pay attention to in this conversation?
Yeah, so that's affect profile.
Okay.
So one of the things that I study a lot is positive and negative affect. In other words, your mood levels. For the longest time, psychologists believe that positive and negative affect were opposites. So, being positive is not being negative and vice versa. That's wrong.
It's wrong.
It's wrong. Positive
Okay.
and negative mood are produced in different parts of the limbic system of the brain for a good reason. You need both positive and negative emotions. The negative emotions are fear and anger and disgust and sadness. There's
Which
only
help
four.
you survive.
Yeah, I mean that's the way that the Garretts made it off the Pleistocene and made it to
Exactly.
here, man. And it's not because
God
they were
bless
having
them.
a great day. It was because they were avoiding being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger by being afraid and
Right.
and running away, for example, or not eating something poisonous, etc. So you have those. You also have positive emotions that give you an impulse to approach something that could be that you really like, that would be good calories, that would give you, potential offspring, give you mates, all that stuff that caveman stuff, which is why joy comes from this sense of getting pleasure, hitting parts of the limbic system. They're independent. They're not dependent on each other. And so you can be one of four kinds of people with respect to affect. You can be unusually high positive and unusually high negative. That's called a high affect person. That's a super
Right.
into it. You can be low, which is to say that your affect levels, your mood levels tend to be quite muted. You feel emotions much more in less intensely.
Kind of like elevator music.
Kind of, yeah. But the high, by the way, is called the mad scientist affect profile because everything is like bad, good, right? It's very hard to be married to a mad scientist. You should ask my wife. So low is called the judge.
Okay.
There's certain things that you want somebody who's not all over the place and really messy, like a judge or a surgeon. You don't want somebody who opens you up and says, oh my God. You want somebody who's going to be kind of cool. There's people who are high positive and low negative. Those are called cheerleaders.
Okay.
Everybody wants to be a cheerleader because they are, in fact, happier than average, as you can imagine, because their negative affect is muted. On the other hand, they have certain disadvantages. They tend to make bad CEOs because they don't see threats and they won't accept bad news and they can't give negative evaluations. They want everybody to be happy all the time, right?
They're kind of choked by their happiness or
well,
positivity.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's had a boss who's a great cheerleader, and he comes into your office and says, Major, you're the linchpin of this network. And you're going like, it's awesome. You're calling your wife going, and then you hear him in the next office saying it to the moron who is completely incompetent. You're like, it's very disheartening. So then you've got the low.
It's clear he's been spying on me. I don't know how he got in the building, but whatever.
Low positive, high negative, which is the last affect profile. That's called the poet. And that's, those are people who feel negative affect very intensely and they feel positive affect very weakly. And they tend to be unhappier than average, but they also tend to be more creative than average. And part of the reason is there's a part of your brain, part of the limbic system called the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex that you use for rumination. Now that rumination center is when you're feeling regret, you're feeling dumb, and it's very, very implicated in depressive disorder. That's when serotonin levels tend to be low. That's when it's really high. That's when rumination is high. That's why people take serotonin drugs when they're clinically depressed.
Right.
But it's also what you use when you're ruminating on something creative, like a poem or a symphony or a business plan or something. And that's why when you think of a really creative person, you think of somebody who's a poet, literally, somebody who's romantic, and somebody who's depressed, because it's all the same part of the brain. It's actually doing that. So everybody's got their strengths, but you got to know yourself, and that's why this information is so useful.
And that's why the study of yourself can yield results. We'll talk more about that when we come back for segment 2 of the Takeout from Fish Taco in Tyson's Corner, Virginia with Arthur C. Brooks. Stay with us.
One guy in 15 minutes gave himself 190 shocks, painful electric shocks, because he didn't want to be bored.
Happy New Year and welcome back to the Takeout. Arthur C. Brooks, best-selling author, student, practitioner of happiness is our special guest. He has a brand new book out this year, Build the Life You Want with Oprah Winfrey, other books from strength to strength. So Art and Fari, my producer, is here. Sarah Cook, my producer, is here. They've been part of the Takeout team for many years. We have a slogan,
All right.
an internal slogan. It has two parts. One, control the controllables. And the two things you can influence day to day in your professional life are your enthusiasm and your effort. Those are the two slogans we live by.
I like it.
Things we can't control, we don't fret about, or we try not to fret about.
It's like the Alcoholics Anonymous prayer.
Kind of, and we focus on our effort
Right.
and our enthusiasm.
Right. It's great.
Because those are the internal things
Right.
that can drive us forward.
Right.
Evaluate those.
That's really important. It's actually really wise in general for the following reason. Most people are frustrated and don't get happier. Well, there's a number of mistakes that they make. Number one is they think happiness is a feeling, which it is not, or they think they can somehow be cosmically happy, which they can't. But the biggest mistake that I see again and again is looking for outside circumstances to change. It's looking for the stuff that other people are responsible for. I'll be happy when the economy turns around. I'll be happier when my husband starts being nicer to me. I'll be happier when my health gets better. And in a small microcosmic way, what you're saying is, no. Don't link your happiness and success to what's actually going on outside of you. Pay attention to the thing you can actually control. When you're doing a show, you can be enthusiastic, which you are, and you can work hard, which you do. And that's going to give you the highest possible numbers in terms of quality and impact, notwithstanding what else is going on that's outside your control. And that's the way to live your life. That's the way to live your life in every single way, to wake up every day and say, okay, there's a lot going on. I don't like all of it because that's life. What can I actually affect? And how am I going to turn the dials on the things I can actually affect? And that's a game changer. It's been huge for me. You know, I think about that a lot. I think, okay, what can I do? I can be bummed out about something that's going on around me and have that actually drag down my wife, or I can work to have a happier marriage today. Because I can actually affect that. It's amazing. After 33 years, my mood really affects my wife. And so let's think about actually how we can do that. And that's the same principle that you're bringing to your job that you can bring to every part of your life, and so can everybody watching us.
So you mentioned a moment ago, people make a mistake thinking that happiness is a feeling.
Right.
It isn't.
No. Feelings are evidence of happiness, like the smell of your turkey is evidence of your Thanksgiving dinner. It's not the same thing. The Thanksgiving dinner is tangible. These fish tacos are a real thing. They smell good.
And they're very good, by the way.
But if you walked into, Fish Taco here in Tyson's Corner and you said, man, it smells so good in there, and they said, well, that's the whole lunch. Here's the check. You'd be pretty disappointed, and you'd leave a bad review on Yelp. The point is that you're enticed by the smell for something, and that's an important way to think about happiness as well. If you're looking for the smell, you're not going to get the real thing. You're going to get evidence of it occasionally when the circumstances are right. Real happiness is a combination of enjoyment of your life, satisfaction with your accomplishments, and the meaning of your existence. It's enjoyment plus satisfaction plus meaning. And each one of those has a big scientific literature and a lot of common sense and theology. And each one of those things is a lifelong effort, and we can get better at all of them.
Does meaning necessarily flow through faith?
No. Meaning really has three parts to it. Number one is coherence, why things happen the way they do. You got to have a theory. It's purpose, which is the goals and direction in your life. You got to be moving forward, making progress. And it's significance, why your life matters. A really, really good way to get that is transcendence, transcending yourself by serving others, transcending yourself by having a relationship with the divine, for sure. But there's lots and lots of ways to do that. I'm writing a book right now called The Meaning of Your Life and How to Find It Before It's Too Late. Because the science of meaning is really one of the most explanatory bodies of literature that help us understand why people in their 20s and 30s today are having exploding rates of depression and anxiety, because we find that they're less likely to have a sense of meaning in their life than any other generation, and we actually know why.
Why?
Because they're not using the parts of their brain that must be employed to gain life's meaning. I'll give you an example. When you are bored, a part of your brain is stimulated called the default mode network. It's a series of structures in your brain. When your mind is wandering, the default mode network is what you think about when you're thinking about nothing. It turns out those are the parts of your brain that you need to assess big questions of understanding life's meaning. And if that set of structures is never turned on because you're never bored, you're never going to explore life's meaning. Now, we have mastered all kinds of technologies that make boredom a thing of the past. You know, it's like Grandpa Garrett came home and said, I don't know the meaning of my life. No.
He didn't.
Why? Because he was bored all day. What did he do for a living? What did your grandpa do?
He was a school teacher and then a principal.
Okay, so actually he was probably bored a little bit less. But the truth is, when he was going to work or when he was by himself, he didn't have earbuds in. He wasn't listening.
No.
He wasn't listening to the Takeout.
No.
He was alone in his thoughts.
Right.
And all the time he was alone in his thoughts, his default mode network was turned on, and he was assessing questions of meaning, whether he meant to or not. And that's why previous generations had a greater sense of meaning than we do. We've eliminated boredom.
Through, just as an example, TikTok, Instagram, and other things.
Everything we do. I mean, you stop at in your car and you're at a traffic light, and you're like, yeah, this light's really long. You take out, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, who's texting me? Is there anything on, Twitter?
Right.
I mean, 'cause as journalists and academics, we're looking at that,
Right. Relentlessly.
like everybody else. And it's really interesting, too. We're made to not like boredom, but we're made to be bored. It's a weird conundrum, actually. We have these experiments. There's one of my colleagues, Dan Gilbert at Harvard. He's a brilliant psychologist. He's just the best at what he does. He had an experiment where he made people bored. He put them into a room where there's nothing to do for 15 minutes, nothing to do, except they had one button in front of them. If they press the button, they get a painful electric shock. That's all they can do. So they leave them in the room. They say it's going to be 15 minutes. One by one after another, they start giving themselves shocks because they don't want to be bored. One guy in 15 minutes gave himself 190 shocks, painful electric shocks, because he didn't want to be bored. Okay, now, what do you prefer, Major? A painful electric shock or Twitter? I'll take the shock, by the way.
Yeah, it's actually closer than you think.
Yeah.
So I have another phrase in my life. What you want to do is what you're doing. Meaning, I'll talk to someone and say, I want to write a book. And I say, are you writing a book? Well, no. Then you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to do X.
Yeah.
Are you doing that? Or are you working in that direction?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, then you really don't want to do that. Is that too harsh?
No, that's very astute. I was a CEO for a long time. As you know, I ran the American Enterprise Institute in D.C. Last time we talked, actually, we were talking about the kind of stuff that I did back when I was at AEI.
Right.
And one of the things that I learned is that when you're hiring talented people, which we uniformly did, I mean, it's a great think tank and hired people with PhDs and really smart people, that they can do all kinds of stuff incredibly well. Never hire them to do something that they don't want to do, even though they can do it well, because they won't do it. They won't do it. In people's jobs, they'll wind up doing the thing that they like. That's why people always give you the graduation advice. Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Now, inevitably, Scott Galloway, who's fantastic, he says that the guy giving that advice actually had an aluminum smelting business or something, and now he's really, really rich and just golfs a lot. And he's giving you this advice, which is valid or not. But the whole point is, when you're evaluating the things that you're going to do, always take, number one, you have to be able to support yourself if it's your job, but always take the most interesting option. Humans are built to be interested in stuff. The human brain, it's one of the basic positive emotions is interest. We're made to learn, and we're curious creatures. Find the thing that's most interesting to you, not easiest, not most fun, that's most interesting to you, and then you'll do the thing that you want to do, and your desires and your goals and your proclivities and your pay will be aligned. And that's when you'll not be caught, with somebody correctly observing that you're not doing something because you actually didn't want to do it.
Right. Right.
So it's very astute, your observation, by the way. It's quite correct.
And that is based on my own, like I will say to myself, I want to do this. And I say, really? Are you doing anything related to that? Well, no, Major.
How's your book coming, Major?
Right. Because currently, I don't want to write a book.
How's the introduction?
Because I'm not writing it right now, More on the science, the applicability, the availability of happiness when we return. Again, Happy New Year, Happy 2025 from Fish Taco in Tyson's Corner, Virginia with Arthur C. Brooks.
The happiest people learn and grow the most actually from the most negative experiences that they have, and they actually know how to manage their negative emotions.
Welcome back to Takeout. Arthur C. Brooks. The study of happiness is our topic. Happy New Year. Happy 2025. Arthur, I'm sure you've encountered people say, wait a minute, sir, with all due respect, I've had an S-ton of things happen in my life. They've collapsed on my head without any expectation that I had. I've been jarred and dislodged by those things. They make me unhappy when I think about them.
Right.
They're huge barriers. What am I supposed to do about that?
Yeah. That's life, that's for sure. And everybody has got those things. Some people have a double and triple helping of those particular things. The happiest people learn and grow the most actually from the most negative experiences that they have, and they actually know how to manage their negative emotions. So negative emotional self-management is the most important skill that anybody can have. You can either be managed by your emotions or you can manage your emotions. And this is a really important area of cognitive neuroscience, for example, is knowing how the brain's limbic system works. The limbic system is a console of tissue that was evolved between 2 and 40 million years ago. And its whole job is taking information below your level of consciousness that you're perceiving and turning it into emotions. The negative emotions say, that's a threat, you should avoid it. The positive emotions are telling you, that's an opportunity, you should approach it. That's all emotions are. They're nothing more than data. And if you understand that, you can start to manage it in the prefrontal cortex of your brain and use time. So for example, Grandma Garrett almost certainly taught you, Major, when you're angry, count to 10 before you say anything, right?
Sure.
What is she telling you? Give your limbic system time to relay this information to your prefrontal cortex, the executive center of your brain, where you can decide what it means and what you want to do, where you can have mastery over it.
Right.
So you don't blow yourself up, but more importantly, where you make decisions that are in your interest.
Where your board of directors are, and they can review the approach.
And really reactive people who don't have good emotional self-management can't do that very well. There's a whole class of people in our society that can't do it. They're called little kids. Right, and that's why you say when your kids were little, you'd say use your words when they're screaming because you forgot to cut the crusts off their peanut butter sandwiches. And the reason is because they were being managed by their limbic systems because the wiring was inadequate. Actually, the synaptic connections between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex were underdeveloped. It actually is not completely developed in human females until the age of 21. Human males till like 70. So, which explains several problems in our society.
More than ever, yeah.
So that's important, is that actually the most emotionally well-adjusted people don't have a lack of negative emotions. They know how to manage their negative emotions so that they get the signals but are not debilitated by the signals. Now, when it comes to experiences, that's a whole class of things that will fire your emotions, but they're things that you don't like in your life that are going on. A failed marriage, a death in the family, a bankruptcy, being fired, getting sick, all these things that naturally befall people, and some people have a lot more of that than others. People who are really well-adjusted start to see those things as an opportunity for learning and growth. And these are the people who don't suffer for the rest of their lives from post-traumatic stress disorder, but rather from post-traumatic growth. The good news is that's 90% of people. 90% of the cases, more or less, depending on the data you're looking at, have post-traumatic growth and learn from these experiences. The true masters are the ones who start to see these negative experiences as an opportunity to learn and grow. And even when these things happen, to say, something good's gonna come from that. So here's what I recommend everybody watching us so you can make this happen in your life. Keep a failure and disappointment journal.
A failure and disappointment journal.
Right, I mean, people like to keep a journal of happy things.
Right.
Fine, but that's boring. Failure and disappointment, that's interesting. Every time something bad happens that bums you out, little or big, you decide, you write it down and leave 2 spaces below the entry. After 1 month, set a reminder in your calendar to come back and fill in the next line, which is, in that last month, what did I learn from that thing that happened a month ago? And then in the line below it, after 3 months, come back and say, what good thing happened because of that experience that I had? In so doing, you will learn and grow automatically, and you've wired it into your brain through your learning system and your prefrontal cortex by keeping this failure and disappointment journal. And within a year, you're going to start looking forward to writing this bad thing down.
Really?
Yep.
And for many of my audience, they will have some living memory of hearing some successful person say, I learn more from my failures than my successes.
Everybody thinks that. I mean, if I say, Major, tell me how you became resilient and the man that you are today, you wouldn't say, all those weeks at the beach. No, that's not what you tell me. You tell me hard things that happen to you, hard things that happen, because that's what makes you the kind of person you are. Now, again, sometimes pain is just pain, man.
Right.
But you're still going to learn from it, is the way that actually works. There's a reason that sort of the great saints throughout history have endured so very much and can teach us so very much from the difficult things that happen in their lives. And the goal for all of us is don't try to eliminate pain. Never try to eliminate pain. Manage the negative emotions and learn and grow from the experiences.
How much does self-image flow through this? Meaning, I'd be happier if I weighed 15 pounds less, or I had less hair or more hair. Almost anyone says less hair.
I don't think you'd be happier with less hair. You got to trust me on this one, man. I kind of have a PhD in that. Actually, I saw data on this, by the way. I don't mean to distract you from this important question, because this is stupid, but still. I saw data on bald men and what they actually think when they see a guy like you. It's resentment.
I don't know how many times I should have been punched right in the face. But the self-image, how much of this flows through that? Meaning how happy people either think they are or aspire to be.
Well, people have a sense of who they are as people, to be sure. And one of the most important things that we can all do is to change who we think we are as people by reinventing ourselves. That's a process of kind of self-entrepreneurship. If you don't like who you are, be different. Become a different person. That's called the as-if principle. It's actually introduced by William James, the great psychologist, professor at Harvard. Actually wrote for The Atlantic, like me. So I like to, 1910, I like to call him my colleague William James.
Yes, right.
Isn't that pretentious? Anyway, William James said, act and you will become. And it's sort of like manifesting and all that, but it's not. It's not some spooky new age deal at all. What happens is when you act in a particular way, your feelings will start to conform to your actions as opposed to vice versa. Here's an example. There's one human smile physiologically that's associated with true human happiness. There's 19 types of smiles that depict all different types of things. One is called the Duchenne smile. It was discovered by a social scientist in the 19th century named Duchenne, and of course he named it after himself because you get to do that. It uses two muscles, the orbicularis oculi muscles at the corner of your eyes and the zygomatic major muscles at the top of your cheeks, not your mouth at all. So when you want to know if somebody's happy to see you, look at the eyes, not the mouth. We do that instinctively, right? Okay. So it turns out that when you learn how to engage the Duchenne smile, notwithstanding your feelings, you start to feel happiness. You actually will start to feel happiness. Now, the way to do this, by the way, so everybody, the kids at home, here's how you do it. You take a pencil and put it between your teeth lengthwise on your molars and bite down. Not too hard, don't break the pencil. And when you bite down, that's when you'll scrunch up the corners of your eyes and lift the tops of your cheeks. Do that in a mirror for 20 seconds and your day starts right. You'll actually start being happy. And that's why self-image is so critically important. Who you think you are is the person you become. So start thinking you are something else by deciding to be that person. Your life will change.
We had a gentleman named Admiral William McRaven on this program.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
And he wrote a book called Make Your Bed.
Yeah, it's great.
And he said the reason he wrote that book was it was his belief that starting your day with a tiny accomplishment was a springboard to other potential accomplishments. What do you think of that?
Tons of data show that's exactly the case. So we're at the beginning of 2025, and a question on a lot of people's minds is, what's the right New Year's resolution to make, right? Here's the worst one. Be happier, right? Why? Because that's just huge. I mean, it's sprawling like the suburbs of Atlanta.
Right.
You'll never get to the end of it. do a little thing that's a win that's actually on the path to becoming a happier person. That's what McRaven is talking about, that fabulous book based on his graduation speech at UT Austin.
Right.
Just took the nation by storm. Why? Because it rang true to a lot of people that were kind of struggling. If you get up and you make your bed. I remember doing that at 19. I moved away and moved to the East Coast. I'm from the West Coast. I moved to the East Coast, and I moved into this apartment, and I had nothing but a bed. And I woke up on the first morning. I was a musician. I had no money and the whole thing. And I thought, okay, man, what are we going to do? I said, I'm going to make my bed. That was a long time before McRaven gave that speech. I mean, I was just coming up with this organically. And all I had to do was make my bed. And so I did. And I'm like, I don't know why, but I won.
Right.
And that's true. That sets you cognitively up to actually go from one small win to another small win to a bigger win to big changes is the way that this works. Okay, so back to the New Year's resolution.
I'm going to stop you right there because we have to get to a break. Arthur C. Brooks, segment 4 of the Takeout, coming your way from Fish Taco in Tysons Corner, Virginia, in just one moment.
If you're working remotely and all of your contacts are over the screen, you're going to get lonelier and lonelier and lonelier. You're going to have a lot of problems in your life.
Welcome back to the Takeout from Fish Taco in Tysons Corner, Virginia. We thank them for their hospitality. Arthur C. Brooks is our guest. He's been on the show before. For those of you who remember, it was in February 2020, right after the New Hampshire primary, before our country and the world lurched into the pandemic. Arthur, was that period of time, lockdown, pandemic, a kind of scientific extravaganza for those in your space? I mean, did you learn things through that observation or data collection process that you couldn't have learned any other way?
Yeah. For example, there were big questions going into that. In an era of remote work, which was coming anyway, what does it actually do for happiness? The answer is bad things.
Bad things.
Yeah, bad things. And part of the reason is because a huge source of our happiness actually comes from the production of oxytocin, which is a hormone. It's a neuropeptide in the brain that we get from eye contact and touch. The reason that this conversation is way, way better than it would have been on Zoom is because you and I are sitting next to each other, talking to each other. This is how humans were designed to communicate with each other. And you know who your kin are. Mm-hmm. You know who your friends are. You know who your family are. You know who the people in your tribal group are on the basis of the oxytocin that's produced in the human brain, which is intensely satisfying. And if you don't have it, you're going to get insomnia. You're going to have all of these, really terrible effects on your happiness, your appetite, just your ability to function is the way that this works. Why many neuroscientists call it the love molecule.
Right.
And what we found, what the question was going to be, if you get eye contact over Zoom, do you get any oxytocin? The answer is almost none. Social media, none. Okay. And so the result is people who are working remotely. We didn't know this until we actually had data from the coronavirus epidemic. If you're working remotely and all of your contacts are over the screen, you're going to get lonelier and lonelier and lonelier. You're going to have a lot of problems in your life.
And people also discovered things about themselves and their spouses and their children that they didn't know previously.
That was the Divorce Lawyers Full Employment Act of 2020. And it wasn't great for a lot of marriages. Like, I remember my wife's like, I married you for better or for worse, but not for lunch.
That's a great line.
Sorry, honey.
That's a great line.
Harvard's not letting me come in. And so and so I was teaching, and it was intensely productive. I mean, I got the book that we've got on the table in front of us here, From Strength to Strength. I got it. That was my coronavirus epidemic project. Mm-hmm. Then I launched my column in The Atlantic, How to Build a Life. I did a whole bunch of work. For about 93% of the population, it was really, really hard. About 7% of the population got much happier. So, I mean, the 93% of us
that's 7% in what is sometimes referred to as symbolic work, meaning the work of symbols, of either speaking, writing, conceptualizing, photography, art, things like that. Maybe those were more enhanced or improved by that time.
Could have been, but it's the 7% largely of people who have mostly introverts, okay, who deepened their relationships with the people that they were locked down with. Those are the people who got happier. I have three. We're a nuclear family of 5. Now we've got 9 because 2 are married and they're having children and they're proliferating. But That's not a good way to talk about procreation, is it? They're proliferating. Anyway.
Oh, those proliferators in the family.
Raise them Catholic. They go do Catholic stuff. Anyway, so.
What's our proliferation index?
Oh, I like it. You're a natural social scientist, Major. Well, that's good stuff. Taking it. Anyway, so of the 5 of us in the nuclear family, 4 of us are dogs and 1 is a cat. Right?
Okay, right.
And so it's the dogs. I mean, we're super out there. The cat, my little girl.
Right.
Who, interestingly, is graduating in May from Providence College and going right into the Marine Corps as a Marine Corps officer. So, I mean, she's a trained killer, but she's like a dangerous cat.
Yeah,
okay.
right.
And during the coronavirus epidemic, she did super well. Mm-hmm. She had a great time. You know, she was talking to a few friends here and there. Right. She was with us. Mm-hmm. We had dinner together every night. I'm climbing the walls because I'm like in the 96th percentile in extrovert. It's a pathology. I'm so extroverted, right? Right. And so for a lot of us, it was hard. It was intensely productive, but it was hard because of the insufficiency of oxytocin. Mm-hmm. Whereas for the 7%, you know, it's also the same thing that it led to a lot of pathologies. 85% of people ate worse, gained weight, and their health deteriorated. 15% of Americans got like shredded. Mm-hmm. Right, because they were at the gym all the time and you know, eating high protein diets and doing all this kind of stuff and seeing, wow, abs.
And some Americans drank too much.
Alcohol consumption went way up and hasn't come down. The interesting thing is one of the things that we find is pretty alarming. I mean, no matter how you slice it, alcohol is a neurotoxin. It's a dangerous business. The optimal level of alcohol consumption, notwithstanding the old research, the actual optimal level is 0. That doesn't mean 0 is right for everybody listening to us because, you know, you make all kinds of decisions that for whatever purposes you have in your life. But when it goes up above a drink or 2 a day, it starts to get into the danger zone. And a lot of people actually became functionally alcoholic because they were just bored and they were self-soothing. And that became a habit, became a dependency. Big problem.
What about interventions chemically to help people manage either their mental illness or their sense of comfort in the world around them?
Yeah, so the interventions that we're talking about, some are recreational. Some people use cannabis for that, for example, but that's not what we're talking about. I think we're probably talking about psychiatric drugs. Mostly things like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, like Prozac. What they do is they'll regulate serotonin so it stays longer in the synapse. Basically, what that's doing is trying to decrease the level of rumination in what we talked about a minute ago, the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. And there's something like, depending on the research you're looking at, 30% of people see pretty good effect from it. That's not super high, but it's not nothing. Right. And so the whole point is that sometimes it's worthwhile for people who are really suffering from clinical depression to work with their doctor on an intervention in conjunction with behavioral change, because behavioral change will multiply the effect of chemical interventions if they work, and trying to make substantial alterations for productive ends.
What about for children who are too jumpy?
That's really controversial.
Very.
I mean, that's a really, really controversial thing. Kids who are too jumpy or who have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or something like that, to put them on psychostimulants. And again, it's like, talk to your doctor about that.
Kidding.
But also read as much of the research as you can. One of the most important things in anything having to do with science and medicine is, you know, it's not like you're going to become a doctor, but we have a proliferation of, like my kids, you have a proliferation of information out there about how you can inform yourself, read more, and you need to be an informed patient. It's very irresponsible to leave all of your medical care in the hands of, you know, somebody who doesn't know you as well as you know you. So one of the things that we find in the research, for example, is that when somebody comes in with a baby to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician says something that doesn't sound right to the mom is often right. Okay. Because the mom doesn't know the medical terminology, doesn't have a medical degree, but knows the baby. And when it comes to your own health or your child's health, you know an awful lot. So listen to your intuition, get the facts, get second opinions, and you know, be careful with things that don't quite sound right to you.
Hope you've enjoyed the show, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you a happy new year. We've talked about happiness. Stay tuned for your Takeout Outtake Especial with Arthur C. Brooks from Fish Taco in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. I just remembered that.
That's a nice place, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good place. We'll see you in a bit.
She called me, hey, this is Oprah Winfrey. And I'm like, yeah, this is Batman. You know? Oh, it's actually Oprah Winfrey.
Takeout Outtake Especial. We are at Fish Taco in Tysons Corner, Virginia. Arthur C. Brooks, the best-selling author, is with us. The most recent book, co-authored with Oprah Winfrey, Build the Life You Want. What's it like to work with Oprah Winfrey? I mean, this towering figure, accomplished figure, mega influencer star. What's that like?
Probably one of those 5 most famous people in the world, as a matter of fact. So I've had the opportunity in my career to work with a lot of very prominent people, and generally they're not the same person in public as they are in private, for obvious reasons. I mean, they have a persona. It's good for their careers, but privately they have to be something more conventional and domestic and normal. Oprah's the same person. It's extraordinary.
She is the same person.
She's the same person. And, she seems warm and wonderful and smart in public, and she's the same person when it's just her and me.
Engaging and curious.
And when we're having dinner, just the two of us at her dinner table at her house, she's the same person. It's an incredible integration. It's an incredible feat. And for a long time, I wondered.
And that's probably one of the keys to her success.
Probably. But what it is a key to her personal success and her happiness is the integration of her personality. I mean, Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, said that it's important that you know who you are and you act according to your own values to be a happy person, to be an integrated person, so you don't have a fragmented personality. And she's incredibly emotionally healthy. But I wondered for a while, what actually explains this sort of anomaly for somebody who's actually that prominent. And I think I figured it out. So here's the secret to Oprah-ness and how to be more like Oprah. She has a lot of privilege in her life. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's been able to make a lot of money. She's incredibly famous and a powerful person.
Did not start that way.
No, quite the contrary. And she earned it. I mean, she just climbed her way to the top on the basis of hard work, personal responsibility, and merit. But why does she have this? She believes that she has these things to lift other people up, that she's been given these gifts and she's earned these privileges because her goal in life is to use this for the betterment of other people. And so everything that she has refracts to the betterment of people who are still at the margins, people who do need help, people who do need to have their souls refreshed. She's a truly good person. And so the result of that, she doesn't have to be a different person in private as she is in public. She can be an integrated personality. I mean, I admire her so much more now that I know her personally. I admired her when I just knew her as a famous person, before she called me, hey, this is Oprah Winfrey. And I'm like, yeah, this is Batman. Oh, it's actually Oprah Winfrey. But knowing her personally, I admire her more because that's the person I want to be. And so sometimes I'll actually think, when something's going on and things go well for me, I'm very privileged, I'm very lucky, and I'm feeling a little grumpy, and I'm saying something really stupid and resentful like, first class in United Airlines has really gone downhill, jerk. And I think, what would Oprah do? Not this, and then I'm better.
What a nasty varietal that was. Good grief. Well, they have better wine in first class on United. On that note, Arthur C. Brooks, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Major. It's
Thank
great
you so
to be
much.
with you.
Happy New Year, everyone. We'll see you next week.